Rob Venier. Today we're going to be looking at the introduction to film marketing. I'm going to talk to you about what we're doing in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be doing an analysis of the marketing of the conglomerate mainstream film Straight Outta Compton and the independent film I, Daniel Blake. Now this will relate to component 1 of your exam, section B. It's going to be an in-depth study covering all your areas of theoretical framework. We'll be looking at media language, media industries, audiences and media context. We're going to be studying Straight Outta Compton from 2015. That's a mainstream film, a conglomerate movie from Universal. And we'll be looking at the independent UK film I, Daniel Blake from 2016. We'll be looking at the marketing across various media, exploring how convergence of media platforms and technologies and other relevant media industries affect their marketing. This will be to do with cross-media convergence in terms of synergy and cross-platform promotion as part of conglomeration. But it will also be looking at new technologies about how films are marketed and advertised, particularly using the internet. So let's have a look at what Syllabus says. It says that you as students will be developing an awareness of the films as contemporary examples of the film industry and of how its marketing strategies. So we're looking at how films are advertised and promoted. In particular, we'll be closely studying the trailers of the movies and the posters for the films. We'll also be looking at their online marketing, how they use viral marketing, how they use merchandising, how they use social media to advertise the movies. In particular, we're also going to look at the opening title sequence from each film and be textually analysing those in depth. We'll also be looking at one key sequence from each film. So, in terms of relevant theories, this is going to cover all sorts of stuff. Principally, it's going to be looking at the industry stuff. So we're going to look at Power and Media Industries by Curran and Seaton. We're going to look at Cultural Industries by David Hesmagulch. We're going to be looking at effects theory from people like Al Bandura and cultivation theory of George Gerbner. Reception theory of Stuart Hall. It's going to relate to audience theories like The End of the Audience from Clay Shirky. We're also going to be looking at media regulation. We're looking at Sonia Livingston and Peter Lund's theories. There'll also be, because there's textual analysis in here of the posters and the video, so it's going to have semiotic and narrative and genre structuralist theories you can apply to it as well. Now, to give you a bit of a background for this, I'm going to talk to you about vertical integration. Now, you will understand a little bit of this from the study we've already done of Disney, but I just want to remind you of it. This is contextual more than anything. How much you'll have to go into these when you're talking about these two movies, I don't know. But having said that, this is stuff that you will need to know anyway in terms of, well, certainly in terms of the industry anyway. Okay, so we're going to look at the film value chain, which is a more business-orientated term for vertical integration. And we're going to look at the different elements of the film production process, including negative, exhibition and auxiliary streams. This will relate to Power and Media Industries by Curran and Seaton, Cultural Industries by Hesmagulch, End of the Audience by Clay Shirky, and Regulation by Livingston and Lunt. Right, now, what do we mean by a film value chain? When we looked at Disney, remember we talked about the idea of conglomerates. How conglomerates, which means coming together, they converge, don't they? Remember convergence, coming together. Conglomerates are converged companies in which a parent company will buy out or absorb other companies, which we call its subsidiaries, to create a conglomerate. They do this in order to create synergy. Synergy means working together. If a conglomerate owns a number of companies that are all involved in the forms, all in the same stage of production, like making movies, for example, production companies, it will be horizontally integrated. But if it can produce and distribute those films as well, it becomes vertically integrated. So vertical integration is a little bit of an old-fashioned term for this process. It's more commonly recalled today as a film value chain. So we're looking at the way in which a conglomerate company is able to develop, produce, distribute, and then exploit a movie product, all within one single integrated media conglomerate. We call this a simple corporate value chain in business studies terms. We've already talked, for example, about Star Wars. We talked about how Lucasfilm was bought by Disney. It became a subsidiary of that company because Disney also owned other production companies like Marvel Pictures, Walt Disney Motion Pictures, Touchstone, Pixar, etc. That makes them horizontally integrated. Lucasfilm can produce a film, but it cannot distribute it. For that, it needs other companies. Now, in the case of Disney, of course, Star Wars The Force Awakens and Rogue One were both distributed by another Disney subsidiary, Walt Disney Motion Pictures. It's interesting that Disney are now in the process of buying the 20th Century Fox entertainment divisions from Rupert Murdoch. This gives them the potential of the fact that they will own 20th Century Fox film distribution again. So once again, we might see the 20th Century Fox logo at the beginning of the Star Wars films like they used to in the old days. So, vertical integration, as I said, it's a slightly old-fashioned term for a film value chain. It means the same thing. It's where a film studio controls every aspect of film production. It can make the films, distribute them, and control the way they are exhibited. Back in the golden age of Hollywood, up until the 1940s, the Hollywood film studios were completely self-contained and vertically integrated. A single film studio basically not only owned its own production facilities, its own backlots where it could shoot films, its own studios, it had directors and editors and camera operators and costume departments and script writers and everything else you need to make a film, all on their payroll as employees. They would make the films in-house, make them themselves. They would own distribution divisions which could distribute the films to the cinemas, and in those days they even owned the cinemas themselves, so they had complete control over every stage of the process. At the end of the 40s that was eventually made illegal, and the system we've got now is slightly different, but there are still an element of vertical integration. Again, if we look at Disney, they own part of Hulu, for example, which means they've got a video on demand service nowadays. So they may not own cinemas anymore, but they have got their own video on demand services. You can buy their films as digital downloads off their websites. You can, buy them off, their home entertainment division, because they'll distribute the DVDs and everything as well. Now, this is what a basic film value chain looks like. This theory comes from Lucy Kung in 2008. You could argue it's a little bit out of date because it still uses terms like home video, but use that as a catch-all generic term to mean any way of being able to watch a film at home. It may not be on a video cassette anymore. It'll be a DVD, a Blu-ray, a 4K Blu-ray. It could be, a streaming service like Netflix or Amazon Prime home video, or it could be a digital download of Amazon. It doesn't matter. It's all the same principle. Now, as you can see here, film production goes through various stages. All this stuff here on the left of the image, that in an independent film is usually done by the production company. They will acquire or develop a property. Now, they might buy a screenplay, they might have one submitted to them. A producer might find a good idea for a movie, decide it would make a good film, and then hire someone to write a screenplay. Either way, you acquire some kind of property. You get a screenplay. You then need to get some talent involved. That will mean directors, actors, everyone involved in making the movie: editors, camera operators, set designers, whatever, right? Everything involved. You contract people to work on your film, and you secure financing. You need money to make this film. This will often involve doing a deal with a distributor up front. So you might be an independent company yourself as a production company, but you will go to a conglomerate to get your money. Unless you're, again, someone like Disney, you're part of a massive conglomerate, it's all funded in-house anyway. While you're doing this, you're doing your planning. Once the film has been what they call greenlit, so you've got your green light, and that means you can go ahead and start making the movie, you then go into the production stage. Now, the planning has already been going on from the very beginning. People have been designing costumes, scouting locations, designing props, rehearsing, maybe even starting the special effects at this point. So planning is already well in advance. This is what's called pre-production. In other words, everything is done before making the movie. Once we get into production, this is the process of actually making the film, of filming it. Going on locations, going on sets, getting actors in front of cameras and filming them. A process called principal photography. So you actually shoot your movie. Having done that, you then go into the post-production process. This involves editing the movie. It involves special effects. Or visual effects, I should say, rather than special effects. They're a production process. So it involves doing visual effects. It involves doing the music, all the audio, everything like that. So that's the actual production process. That is all the job of the production company. Usually a production company can do all that. What it can't do is distribute it. That you need a distributor for. So an independent film will have its finished movie. It may then take it to film festivals, screen it at film festivals in the hope of securing a distribution deal. So you license the film to a distributor. That's called the licensing process, and that's principally what film festivals are for. So you tout around to find someone to distribute your movie. In a more conglomerate-based film, you'll have done that right at the beginning. You'll have got your funding for distribution from a conglomerate. So at this point, it's the distribution company takes over. It's their job to market the film. So they do all the advertising, all the promotion. They will cut a trailer. They will, design billboards and posters and all the other marketing for the film. The production company's finished. They've done their bit. They've sold the movie to the marketing company. They will then get all the money from now on, depending what kind of deal you've got. So it's the distribution company's job then to make prints, in other words, make copies of the film to send to cinemas. That is the process called distribution. They do deals with the cinemas, send the movie to the films. It is released in a cinema release. It will be in a release window where it's shown for X number of weeks, before eventually moving on to other formats like home movies. In home video, I should say. In this case, it doesn't just have to be DVD and Blu-ray, but it'll go through a rental process probably before it's available to buy. Sometimes the release window is narrowing nowadays, so sometimes they get onto DVD and Blu-ray exactly at the same time as they hit the cinemas. It's rare, but it happens. It's called day and date release. Eventually they will sell the rights to broadcasters, television basically, so the TV can show it. So that's a simple and slightly outdated illustration of how the value chain works. Slightly more complicated one, but essentially the same. Splits into negative and print and advertising streams. This is what you might be more likely to see for a conglomerate. So whilst the production company takes care of the negative streams, it's called a negative because back in the old days when films were made on physical film, this stuff, you shoot it as a negative, it reverses everything. So black is white, white is black. If you're doing it in a black and white film. Some films are still made on film, that's the point. Right. So the negatives, the actual process of making the film, the pre-production, the production, post-production is all the negative stream. That's done by the production company. Well, the print and advertising stream is done by the distribution company. This diagram from Vickery and Hawkins assumes that you have made a deal with the distribution company up front. So this is probably part of, say, a conglomerate structure. It also, as you can see down here, once you've actually got your filmed entertainment product, you've made it, you've got an exhibition stream and an auxiliary stream. So this in particular ties in more with the conglomerate structure, because over here, this is the actual process of showing the film in the cinema, getting it onto television, broadcast TV companies like the BBC and ITV and Channel 4, pay TV like Sky Movies, Sky Box Office, DVD and video. Again, this is slightly outdated. We can say DVD, Blu-ray, video on demand like Netflix, like Amazon, etc. Digital distribution, well, yeah, Netflix and Amazon, but also, it can be a digital download of iTunes. It can be streaming for rental. There's a much bigger world of opportunity now for distribution. But the real conglomerate thing over here is this auxiliary stream. This is to do with transmedia storytelling. It's to do with synergy. So you've got your merchandising. Remember, films like Star Wars are principally there to sell toys. You can say the same about Pixar movies. You can say the same about the Marvel films, all that kind of stuff. But media spin-offs, that might be like a spin-off TV series, an animated version. It could be, other things like soundtrack album, I suppose, or whatever. Advertising and promotion, doing deals with McDonald's to do branded Happy Meals or whatever. There's also technology spin-offs. Maybe in the production of your film, you invented a new camera, or you invented a new camera mount, or some kind of new special effect or something that can then be used in other movies. Now, I'm not entirely sure you're going to need to know this kind of stuff, but since this is to do with the difference between what an independent film is and what a conglomerate film is, it's probably going to be useful. The way in which films are financed differ for an independent film and a conglomerate film. As I already said, one thing you can do is an independent production company might find finance for the film itself. They'll do it all themselves, make the movie, and then sell it to a distribution company. Another way of doing it, and this is a way that most British films are made, and I, Daniel Blake, will be no exception, is they use what's called a pack of cards deal. This is where a group of companies come together, production companies, regional film agencies, distribution companies, and the British Film Institute, so will provide lottery funding in a lot of cases. They will all come together to fund the film up front. So you do a deal with the distribution company right at the beginning and says, if you give us some money to make the film in the first place, you can distribute it later. So a bunch of companies all work together. So it's a way in which you can get synergy without actually being part of a conglomerate. So if we look at something like I, Daniel Blake, the production companies for it include 16 Films, Why Not Productions, and Wild Bunch. Now, they're all independent production companies. This is a UK-French co-production. Part of the money came from France, part of it came from the UK. Now, 16 Films is Ken Loach's production company. Ken Loach is the director of I, Daniel Blake, and all of his films are made by his production company. He got money from Wild Bunch and from Why Not Productions, because his films are particularly popular in France for some reason, don't know why. But a common thing with British films is they will get money from the British Film Institute, particularly through lottery funding, so it's sort of like a charity, both production and distribution. I'll come on to that later. But the other thing, of course, is these are all the production companies, but what about distribution? Well, BBC Films are one of the production companies. Now, why would the British Broadcasting Corporation, a public service TV company, a TV broadcaster, want to make movies? Well, films are actually a relatively cheap way to make content to put on their channel. You got BBC One, you got BBC Two, you got BBC Three, which is online now. You got BBC Four. They need content, and when you look at a high quality, hour of TV drama, consider something like Sherlock or Doctor Who or, Downton Abbey if you're ITV, these kind of shows, they can cost well over £1 million an hour to make. Well, a movie might only cost £5 million, in which case it's a pretty cheap way to fill up a couple of hours of TV, whilst also making some profit from showing it in the cinema and selling it on DVD as well. So it's actually a pretty good deal for a TV company to make movies. That's why Channel 4 do it as well. But when it comes to distribution, they've got a specialist independent distributor here in the case of E1, who are a Canadian distribution company. They're a spin-off of a record label. So all these companies have come together to finance the film up front. In terms of government money, Daniel Blake, Entertainment or E1 UK, got £300,000 off the lottery for distribution fund, what's called the big audience. In other words, they're trying to get their film in front of as many, audience members as possible, give it a nice wide release. Daniel Blake for Wild Bunch International Sales got £9,275 from the Film Export Fund to help distribute the film internationally. And 16 Films, which of course remember is Ken Loach's film production company, got £350,000 off the film fund to help produce it in the first place. This is an art grant off the government, helps promote UK industry and UK films abroad. Hollywood does things differently. Now, it's a bit of a misnomer, really, to talk about the difference between conglomerate and independent films. As I said, back until the 40s, all films were part of a studio system, as it was called, where each studio produced, distributed, and exhibited the films themselves. Nowadays, pretty much all film production in Hollywood is really independent. The companies that produce the films are independent, but the films that distribute them are conglomerates. So what will happen is an independent film company will come up with an idea for a film. They will then sell that idea or pitch that idea at least, to a conglomerate company in the hope of getting funds to make the movie. So they will do this on a film-by-film basis. They will try to get funding off conglomerates. But the production company, who are technically independent, will do all the hiring of the cast and crew. They make the films on an independent basis, so they don't have to have permanent staff. Or at least only a handful of permanent staff. It's a lot cheaper than having them on payroll all the time. So individual producers, they will get together, work on a one-off package, get the finance, hire everybody involved, hire equipment, hire studio time off a conglomerate to make the movie. If we look at Straight Outta Compton, originally the film was developed by New Line. New Line are a subsidiary of the Time Warner conglomerate. They're part of Warner Brothers Pictures. They developed the film to a certain extent, but decided they couldn't or didn't want to carry it any further. They've obviously done enough work to get a credit on it, though. But the film was essentially made by Legendary Pictures. Legendary Pictures were, at the time, an independent company. They've since been bought out by a Chinese conglomerate, but at the time they were independent. However, they had traditionally been working with Warner Brothers as a distribution company. But after 2014, or was it 2015, one or the other, they began to work almost exclusively with Universal. They are still distributed by Universal, their films. So, Legendary Pictures is the production company is independent, but the distribution company, which is the one that's particularly important to us because we're looking at the marketing and promotion, is Universal. Universal are a conglomerate company. Universal are a subsidiary of NBC Universal. They, in turn, are a subsidiary of Comcast, which are probably, well, they were the largest media conglomerate in the world. Now that Disney have bought out Warner, that might be different now. But at the time, they were the biggest conglomerate in the world. Just another point when it comes to distributing movies. The entire purpose of marketing is to get people to come and see your films. And as Jason Squire here points out, most patrons choose to see a movie on the opening weekend or the weekend that follows, and there's usually a sharp drop-off in admissions during the subsequent weeks. So the idea for most films, particularly those made by a conglomerate, is to get as many people into the cinema as possible in the first 2 weeks. After that, there will be a major drop-off of admissions, and most people won't go and see it after that. So most films don't stay in the cinema for very long, but as we'll see when we look at our research for I, Daniel Blake, it stayed in cinemas considerably longer than most films would, because it's an independent movie and it had to build its audience up slowly. Okay, that's a brief introduction to the film industry. Most of that is mainly for context. As I said, I don't know what kind of questions you're going to have to answer in the exam, because nobody knows. I doubt you'll need to know as much of that in detail, but it is useful background and context to help understand how the entire thing works. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask. I will be going through this in class. This will be here mainly for people who've missed it or for revision. So, in class we'll be doing some textual analysis of the trailers and posters and doing some research. Talk to you next time.